Dr. Marcus Webb was having what he generously termed a routine diplomatic medical consultation when the throne room of the Zephyrian royal palace exploded into chaos, laser fire, and what appeared to be a very well-organized attempt to overthrow several centuries of alien monarchy in the space of about 15 minutes. Marcus had been reviewing medical protocols with the palace staff, ensuring that the upcoming peace summit between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire would proceed without anyone dying from preventable medical complications. It was exactly the kind of careful, methodical work that had made him the go-to medical officer for sensitive diplomatic missions. What it hadn't prepared him for was finding himself in the middle of a coup attempt led by what appeared to be half the Zephyrian military, armed with weapons that could probably vaporize small moons, and an apparent grievance against their current leadership that involved a lot of shouting in harmonious alien languages. Dr. Webb. Chief Diplomat Elena Rodriguez's voice crackled through his comm unit over the sound of energy weapons and very angry Zephyrian war cries. "Where are you?" "Throne room," Marcus replied, pressing himself against a marble pillar while rebel forces swept through the palace with military precision. "Elena, the royal guard is falling back. This looks like a complete governmental collapse. Can you reach the evacuation point?" Marcus assessed his position, noting the strategic placement of rebel forces between him and any reasonable escape route. "Negative. I'm pinned down near the..." His analysis was interrupted by the sight of Queen Lysandra herself, the centuries-old monarch of the Zephyrian Empire, stumbling backward under laser fire from her own rebellious military commanders. Her ceremonial robes, normally a masterwork of flowing fabric that seemed to capture and reflect light like liquid gold, were torn and scorched. Her ceremonial crown, a delicate construction of crystalline formations that had probably taken master craftsmen years to create, tumbled from her head and rolled across the blood-stained marble floor. Queen Lysandra fell hard, her luminescent golden skin flickering with the stress patterns that Marcus had learned indicated severe distress in Zephyrian physiology. She was tall, elegant, with the pointed ears and regal bearing that marked her as royalty, but in that moment she looked like nothing so much as someone who needed immediate medical attention. Marcus didn't think. He just moved. Training kicked in, 15 years of emergency medicine, diplomatic service, and the kind of ingrained reflex that made him respond to medical crises before considering political ramifications. He sprinted across the throne room, dodging laser fire and falling debris, and dropped to his knees beside the fallen queen. "Your Majesty," he said, conducting a rapid medical assessment while laser battles raged around them, "are you injured?" Queen Lysandra looked up at him with eyes that shifted color like deep ocean water, currently showing what Marcus had learned were shades of shock and disbelief. You came to help me." "You fell," Marcus said matter-of-factly, checking her for injuries with the same careful attention he'd give any patient. "Can you stand?" Yes, I believe so." Marcus helped her to her feet with gentle precision, one hand supporting her elbow, the other steadying her shoulders until she found her balance. Queen Lysandra leaned against him briefly, and Marcus noted that her skin was warmer than human normal and seemed to pulse with its own internal light. "Your crown," he said, spotting the fallen headdress near an overturned ceremonial brazier. "One moment." Marcus retrieved the crown from where it had rolled, noting that several of the crystalline elements were cracked but still structurally sound. He returned to Queen Lysandra and carefully placed it back on her head, adjusting the positioning with the same meticulous attention he'd use when setting medical equipment. "There," he said simply. "You're all right." Queen Lysandra stared at him with an expression that suggested she was processing something that didn't fit into any category her royal experience had prepared her for. Before either of them could say anything else, the Royal Guard's counterattack began in earnest. Elite Zephyrian warriors swept through the throne room with devastating efficiency, putting down the rebellion with the kind of military precision that suggested this coup attempt had been doomed from the start. "Your Majesty." Captain Veltar, the head of royal security, approached with obvious relief. "We have secured the palace. The rebel commanders are in custody." "Excellent," Queen Lysandra said, though her attention remained fixed on Marcus with unsettling intensity. "Captain, please ensure that Dr. Webb reaches the diplomatic quarters safely." Of course, Your Majesty. Dr. Webb, if you would follow me. As Marcus was escorted from the throne room, he glanced back to see Queen Lysandra still standing where he'd left her, surrounded by courtiers and security personnel, but watching him leave with an expression that he couldn't quite interpret. Hell of a day for a medical consultation, he muttered to himself. 3 hours later, after debriefings, medical checks, and approximately 17 cups of coffee to counteract the adrenaline crash, Marcus was reviewing incident reports when his comm unit chimed with an incoming message. Dr. Webb, this is Queen Lysandra. Could you join me in the private study? I'd appreciate your medical opinion on the afternoon's events. Marcus stared at the comm unit. In 15 years of diplomatic service, he'd never been personally summoned by alien royalty for medical consultations. Of course, Your Majesty. I'll be right there. The Queen's private study was a masterwork of Zephyrian architecture, high vaulted ceilings, crystalline formations that captured and amplified natural light, and furniture that seemed to grow organically from the walls themselves. Queen Lysandra sat behind a desk that was probably worth more than Marcus's annual salary, wearing simpler robes but still radiating the kind of presence that reminded everyone she'd been ruling an interstellar empire since before his grandparents were born. Dr. Webb, she said, rising as he entered, thank you for coming. Your Majesty. How can I help you? Queen Lysandra studied him with those color-shifting eyes, and Marcus realized she was conducting her own assessment, though he couldn't determine what criteria she was using. This afternoon, she said carefully, when I fell during the attack, you helped me stand. Yes, Your Majesty. You didn't seek permission. You didn't wait for royal protocol. You simply helped. Marcus wasn't sure if this was a complaint or an observation. You needed medical assistance, Your Majesty. Emergency medical response doesn't usually allow time for diplomatic procedure. And when you returned my crown, you expected no reward, no acknowledgement, no political favor. I was returning your property, Your Majesty. It seemed like the appropriate thing to do. Queen Lysandra was quiet for a long moment, her luminescence shifting through patterns that Marcus was beginning to recognize as deep thought. Dr. Webb, she said finally, in 3 centuries of rule, you are the first person to help me without expecting something in return. Marcus felt something shift in the air between them, though he couldn't identify exactly what had changed. Your Majesty, I was just doing my job. No, Queen Lysandra said quietly, you were doing something much more important than that. As Marcus left the royal study an hour later, he couldn't shake the feeling that his simple act of helping someone who'd fallen had somehow set something in motion that was far more significant than emergency medical response. He was absolutely right, though it would take him several more days to understand exactly how significantly one moment of instinctive kindness had changed the political structure of an entire interstellar empire. Chief Diplomat Elena Rodriguez found Marcus in the medical bay at 0600 hours, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold approximately 3 hours earlier while he processed the fact that alien royalty was apparently seeking his medical opinions on matters that had nothing to do with medicine. So, Elena said, settling beside him with her own cup and the expression of someone preparing to either provide therapy or document a diplomatic incident, how does it feel to have accidentally become the unofficial advisor to an interstellar monarch? I helped her stand up, Marcus said plaintively. It was basic medical assistance. Marcus, you didn't just help her stand up. According to the palace gossip network that Captain Veltar pretends he doesn't participate in, Queen Lysandra has been asking for your input on everything from trade negotiations to military deployment strategies. Marcus looked up from his coffee with the expression of someone who discovered that reality came with significantly more fine print than advertised. Elena, she's been requesting medical consultations. I assumed she was concerned about potential health implications of recent stress. She's been requesting your presence for decisions that have nothing to do with medicine, Elena corrected, consulting her diplomatic notes. Yesterday she delayed a crucial vote on territorial expansion until you could review the proposal and offer your assessment. My medical assessment, Marcus protested. I was evaluating potential population health impacts. You recommended against the expansion because it would strain medical resources in frontier territories, Elena pointed out. The Queen not only accepted your recommendation, she made it official policy and credited you publicly for the strategic insight. Before Marcus could process that information, his comm unit chimed with an incoming message. Queen Lyssandra's voice, with its characteristic harmonic undertones, filled the medical bay. Dr. Webb, if you're available, I'd appreciate your guidance on today's judicial proceedings. Your perspective on medical ethics may be relevant to the cases under consideration. Marcus stared at the comm unit as if it had started reciting poetry in mathematical equations. Medical ethics in judicial proceedings? She's including you in court sessions, Elena said with obvious fascination. Marcus, Queen Lysandra is restructuring centuries-old Zephyrian legal protocols to incorporate your input. This is a nightmare. This is unprecedented, Elena corrected. Also potentially catastrophic for interstellar relations, but mostly unprecedented. Marcus's comm unit chimed again. Dr. Webb, there's been a development. Prince Valerian has returned from his military campaign and requested immediate audience regarding recent policy modifications. He's curious about new advisory protocols. Who's Prince Valerian? Marcus asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know. Elena consulted her diplomatic briefings with growing concern. Queen Lysandra's nephew and heir apparent. He's been leading military operations in the outer territories for the past year. According to these files, he's known for his traditional approach to Zephyrian leadership and his strong opinions about maintaining royal authority. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. And he's curious about my involvement in policy decisions? Marcus, Prince Valerian just returned to find that his aunt has been taking advice from a human medical officer on matters of state. From his perspective, you've either usurped royal authority or corrupted it with alien influence. I gave medical recommendations, Marcus said defensively. Queen Lysandra asked for my professional opinion on health-related policy implications. She asked for your opinion, Elena corrected, and you gave it honestly, without political calculation or expectation of personal gain. Do you have any idea how rare that is in royal courts? Before Marcus could formulate a response, the medical bay doors hissed open and Queen Lysandra entered with the purposeful stride of someone who'd spent the morning dealing with complicated family politics. She wore formal court robes that seemed to shift color as she moved, creating patterns of light that spoke of both artistic sophistication and practical authority. Her crown, the same one Marcus had retrieved and carefully replaced, caught the medical bay's lighting and scattered it into rainbow fragments across the sterile walls. Dar. Webb, she said, settling gracefully onto a medical examination chair as if it were a throne, we need to discuss the situation with Prince Valerian. Your Majesty, Marcus began, I think there's been a misunderstanding about my role in palace consultations. What kind of misunderstanding? I'm a medical officer. I provide health assessments and treatment recommendations. I have no experience with political advice, royal protocol, or strategic planning. Queen Lysandra studied him with those color-shifting eyes that seemed to see more than they should. Dr. Webb, 3 days ago you helped me stand when I had fallen. You returned my crown without ceremony or expectation of reward. You treated me as a person who needed assistance rather than a political symbol to be manipulated. Yes, Your Majesty. In 3 centuries of rule, you are the first person to offer help without agenda, she continued. The first to give advice without calculating personal advantage. The first to treat me as someone worthy of honest guidance rather than profitable flattery. Elena looked between them with growing understanding. Queen Lysandra, you're not seeking Marcus's medical expertise. You're seeking his ethical perspective. Precisely, Queen Lysandra confirmed. Dr. Webb approaches problems with the same methodical care he brings to medical emergencies. He assesses situations honestly, identifies solutions based on actual needs rather than political expediency, and implements recommendations designed to help rather than to gain advantage. But I'm human, Marcus protested. I don't understand Zephyrian culture, royal protocols, or interstellar politics. You understand something more valuable, Queen Lysandra replied. You understand how to help people. That skill translates across species and political systems. Marcus studied her face, noting the way her luminescence shifted to warmer tones when she was discussing concepts that mattered to her. Your Majesty, what exactly are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to continue doing what you've been doing, she said simply. Look at problems objectively, identify solutions that serve the greatest good, and give me honest recommendations without regard for personal consequence. And Prince Valerian? Queen Lysandra's expression grew more serious, her skin taking on cooler blue undertones. My nephew has spent his entire life preparing to inherit a throne built on traditional Zephyrian authority structures. He expects royal power to flow through military strength and hierarchical command. And instead he finds you consulting with a human medical officer, Elena observed. He finds me implementing policies based on collaborative decision-making and ethical consideration rather than authoritarian decree, Queen Lysandra corrected. Your guidance, Dr. Webb, has helped me remember that true leadership means serving others rather than commanding them. Marcus felt reality shift around him as he began to understand the scope of what Queen Lysandra was describing. Your Majesty, are you saying that our medical consultations have influenced your approach to governing an entire empire? I'm saying that watching you work, the way you prioritize patient welfare over personal convenience, the way you seek the most effective solutions regardless of political implications, has reminded me of principles I had forgotten in 3 centuries of royal obligation. Elena leaned forward with obvious curiosity. What principles? That power should be used to help people stand rather than to keep them down, Queen Lysandra said, her gaze returning to Marcus with something that looked remarkably like gratitude. That the best leaders are those who lift others up. As Marcus processed the implications of accidentally reshaping an alien monarchy through basic medical ethics, he realized that his simple act of helping Queen Lysandra during her moment of vulnerability had triggered something far more significant than he'd imagined. Your Majesty, he said carefully, what happens when Prince Valerian demands to know by what authority I presume to advise Zephyrian royalty? Queen Lysandra's smile was sharp enough to cut through diplomatic protocol. Then I'll remind him that authority earned through service is more valuable than authority inherited through bloodline. As she left the medical bay to prepare for her nephew's arrival, Marcus looked at Elena with the expression of someone who'd accidentally started a political revolution through competent medical practice. Elena, he said quietly, I think I'm in way over my head. Marcus, Elena replied cheerfully, you're about to find out whether alien royal family dynamics are more or less complicated than human ones. My money's on significantly more complicated. Prince Valerian arrived at the palace with the kind of military precision that made Marcus's considerable experience in emergency response feel like amateur hour. The prince's personal guard took positions throughout the royal complex in formations that managed to be both respectful of palace protocol and quietly threatening to anyone who might have ideas about challenging traditional authority. Marcus watched from the medical bay observation windows as Zephyrian military transports landed in the ceremonial courtyard, their occupants emerging with the disciplined efficiency of soldiers who'd spent the past year enforcing imperial will in territories where resistance was measured in planetary destruction. Subtle, Elena observed, joining him at the viewport with intelligence reports that made for disturbing reading. A full honor guard for a family visit. Prince Valerian doesn't seem like the type to do anything casually, Marcus agreed, noting the way the Zephyrian soldiers had positioned themselves to control access to all major palace sections. Marcus, Elena said, consulting her research materials with obvious concern, I've been reading about Zephyrian succession traditions and military culture. Prince Valerian isn't just Queen Lysandra's nephew and heir apparent. What else is he? He's the supreme commander of Zephyrian frontier forces, personally responsible for expanding imperial territory through military conquest. His entire identity is built around traditional concepts of strength, dominance, and royal authority. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. And he's returned to find his aunt taking advice from a human medical officer on matters of imperial policy. He's returned to find that his inheritance has been fundamentally altered by someone he's going to view as either a threat to royal dignity or evidence of alien corruption, Elena corrected grimly. Before Marcus could process the full implications of that assessment, his comm unit chimed with an incoming message. Queen Lyssandra's voice carried undertones of carefully controlled tension. Dr. Webb, could you join me in the throne room? Prince Valerian has requested introduction to my new advisory staff. Advisory staff? Marcus repeated faintly. That would be you, Elena said with the expression of someone documenting either historic diplomacy or spectacular disaster. Marcus, she's presenting you as an official palace advisor. Marcus made his way to the throne room, a vast space designed to intimidate visitors through sheer architectural magnificence. Crystalline formations rose to impossible heights, creating acoustic effects that amplified every sound into harmonic resonance. The throne itself was carved from a single massive crystal that seemed to pulse with its own internal light. Queen Lysandra sat with regal composure, wearing her most formal ceremonial robes and a crown that Marcus had retrieved and carefully replaced. To her right stood Prince Valerian, and Marcus immediately understood why the prince commanded such respect throughout the Zephyrian military. He was tall, even by Zephyrian standards, with the characteristic golden skin of royalty darkened to bronze by extended military service. His pointed ears were positioned in permanent alertness, and his ceremonial armor was a masterwork of both artistic design and functional intimidation. He radiated the kind of authority that came from years of making life-and-death decisions on battlefields across the galaxy. Dr. Webb, Queen Lysandra said as Marcus approached the throne, allow me to present Prince Valerian, commander of our frontier forces and heir to the Zephyrian throne. Your Highness, Marcus said, executing what he hoped was an appropriate diplomatic bow. Prince Valerian studied Marcus with the kind of assessment usually reserved for potential military threats. Dr. Webb. I am told you have been providing my aunt with strategic guidance on imperial policy. I've been providing medical consultation on public health implications of various policy proposals, Marcus corrected carefully. Medical consultation that has influenced decisions regarding territorial expansion, military deployment, and judicial proceedings, Prince Valerian observed, his voice carrying harmonics that made the throne room's crystal formations ring with barely controlled tension. Public health considerations are relevant to all those areas, Marcus replied, trying to maintain professional neutrality while feeling increasingly like he was standing in the middle of a minefield. Prince Valerian's luminescence shifted to deeper gold tones that Marcus was learning to recognize as aggressive alertness. Dr. Webb, by what authority does a human medical officer presume to guide Zephyrian imperial policy? The question hung in the air like a quantum bomb waiting to detonate. Marcus realized that his answer would either justify his involvement in palace consultations or trigger a succession crisis that could destabilize an entire interstellar empire. Prince Valerian, Queen Lysandra interjected before Marcus could respond, Dr. Webb's authority comes from demonstrated competence and ethical integrity, not from bloodline or traditional hierarchy. Aunt Lysandra, Prince Valerian said with forced respect, you are allowing alien influence to compromise royal authority. The heir to the Zephyrian throne should not require guidance from primitive human medical personnel. Marcus felt something protective flare in his chest at the dismissive tone, but diplomatic training kept him silent. This was a family dispute that went far deeper than his involvement in palace consultations. Primitive? Queen Lysandra repeated, her voice carrying new edge. Valerian, Dr. Webb's approach to problem-solving has improved every policy area where I've sought his guidance. Imperial efficiency has increased, civilian satisfaction has risen, and military operations have become more effective. Through what mechanism? Prince Valerian demanded. What could a human possibly understand about Zephyrian imperial governance? He understands, Queen Lysandra said, rising from her throne with royal authority, that true strength comes from lifting others up rather than keeping them down. That's weakness disguised as wisdom, Prince Valerian replied sharply. Royal power maintains order through strength, not through collaborative consultation with inferior species. The throne room fell silent except for the harmonic resonance of crystal formations responding to elevated emotional stress. Marcus realized he was witnessing a fundamental disagreement about the nature of leadership that would determine the future of Zephyrian civilization. "Prince Valerian," he said quietly, stepping forward despite every diplomatic instinct screaming at him to stay out of alien royal family politics, "may I ask you something?" "What?" Prince Valerian turned toward him with predatory focus. "In your military campaigns, when you've achieved your most decisive victories, was it through commanding your forces to obey, or through inspiring them to excel?" Prince Valerian considered the question with obvious suspicion. "Victory comes through superior strategy and overwhelming force. But strategy requires input from officers who understand local conditions," Marcus pressed. "Force requires soldiers who are motivated to fight effectively. How do you get the best performance from your people? Through discipline and clear command authority. And when discipline isn't enough? When you need creative solutions to impossible problems?" Prince Valerian was quiet for a moment, his military mind engaging with the tactical implications. "Then I consult with officers whose expertise I respect." "Exactly," Marcus said. "Your aunt has been consulting with someone whose expertise she respects. The fact that I'm human doesn't change the value of honest analysis and ethical recommendation." "But you're not military," Prince Valerian protested. "You're not trained in imperial governance or strategic planning." "No," Marcus agreed. "I'm trained in identifying problems, developing solutions, and implementing treatments that actually work. Those skills apply whether I'm treating patients or assessing policy proposals." Queen Lysandra moved to stand beside Marcus, her presence lending royal authority to his words. "Valerian, Dar. Webb has demonstrated that effective leadership requires the same qualities that make effective medicine: careful diagnosis, honest assessment, and solutions designed to heal rather than to harm." Prince Valerian studied them both with calculating eyes, and Marcus could see him processing the implications of what they were describing. "You're suggesting," Prince Valerian said slowly, "that imperial authority should be based on service rather than dominance?" "I'm suggesting," Queen Lysandra replied, "that authority earned through helping others is more valuable than authority inherited through bloodline." "And what happens to traditional Zephyrian leadership principles?" "They evolve," Marcus said quietly. "The same way medical practice evolves when new treatments prove more effective than old ones." Prince Valerian was silent for a long moment, his luminescence shifting through patterns that suggested deep thought. Finally, he spoke. "Dar. Webb, if your guidance has truly improved imperial governance, then perhaps I have been viewing your influence through the wrong lens." "What lens should I use?" Marcus asked. Prince Valerian's smile was sharp but no longer hostile. "The lens of strategic advantage. If collaborative leadership produces better results than authoritarian command, then it becomes a tactical necessity rather than philosophical weakness." As the tension in the throne room began to dissipate, Marcus realized that Prince Valerian wasn't just accepting his advisory role, he was reframing it in terms that fit his military worldview. "Prince Valerian," Queen Lysandra said with obvious relief, "would you be interested in observing Dr. Webb's consultation methods? You might find his approach to strategic analysis educational." Prince Valerian's ears tilted forward with genuine interest. "I admit, I'm curious about any methodology that can improve imperial efficiency while maintaining royal authority." Marcus looked between the alien royalty who were apparently planning to make him a case study in collaborative governance, and realized that his simple act of helping someone stand had triggered a revolution in how an entire species approached leadership and power. "Your Majesties," he said carefully, "I should probably mention that I have no formal training in royal advisory protocols." "Neither did I," Queen Lysandra replied with a smile that could power interstellar navigation, "until you taught me that the best advice comes from those who care more about helping than about being right." The formal challenge came at dawn, delivered by a coalition of traditional Zephyrian nobles who had apparently spent the night debating whether allowing alien influence over royal policy constituted grounds for a succession crisis. Marcus found himself summoned to the palace's Grand Assembly Hall, a vast space designed for the kind of formal proceedings that determined the fate of interstellar empires. Representatives from dozens of Zephyrian noble houses filled crystalline amphitheater seating, while Queen Lysandra presided from a throne that seemed to capture and amplify the morning light into patterns that spoke of ancient authority. Dr. Marcus Webb, announced Elder Counselor Thex, whose deep blue skin spoke of centuries of political experience, you stand before this assembly to answer charges that you have inappropriately influenced Zephyrian royal policy through unauthorized advisory activities. Marcus stood in the center of the assembly hall, acutely aware that his medical officer's uniform looked distinctly out of place among the elaborate ceremonial robes worn by alien nobility. Honored counselors, Marcus began, feeling the weight of galactic history settling on his shoulders. The results aren't extraordinary. They're what happens when leadership focuses on helping people succeed rather than controlling their actions. He gestured toward Queen Lysandra, whose luminescence had brightened to supportive gold tones. When Queen Lysandra asks for my input, she's not seeking commands or control. She's seeking honest assessment and genuine recommendations. That creates an environment where the best ideas can emerge regardless of their source. And you believe this approach is superior to traditional Zephyrian authority structures? Counselor Zorith challenged. I believe, Marcus said carefully, that the best medical treatment comes from accurately diagnosing problems and applying solutions that actually work, not from imposing treatments based on tradition or authority. The same principle applies to governance. Prince Valerian activated additional displays showing long-term trend analysis. Dr. Webb's diagnostic approach to policy has identified systemic issues that traditional methods fail to recognize. His solutions address root causes rather than symptoms. Provide a specific example, Elder Counselor Thex requested. Marcus glanced at Queen Lysandra, who nodded encouragingly. The territorial expansion proposal that was delayed last week. Traditional analysis focused on military capability and resource acquisition. Medical analysis identified that rapid expansion would strain medical infrastructure, create supply chain vulnerabilities, and potentially destabilize existing colonies through resource diversion. And your recommendation? Gradual expansion with infrastructure development preceding territorial acquisition. Build the support systems first, then expand into them. The same way you establish medical facilities before conducting complex procedures. Counselor Vexthera consulted her projections with growing understanding. This approach would prevent the cascade failures that have affected previous expansion efforts. Exactly, Queen Lysandra said, rising from her throne with royal authority. Dr. Webb's guidance has helped us avoid mistakes that have cost other empires entire star systems. The assembly fell silent as they processed the implications of what they were hearing. Marcus realized that the nobles weren't just evaluating his advisory methods, they were confronting the possibility that their entire approach to leadership might be fundamentally flawed. Dar. Webb, Elder Counselor Thex said finally, you're suggesting that authority should be earned through service rather than inherited through bloodline. I'm suggesting that authority should be measured by results rather than by tradition, Marcus corrected. Queen Lysandra doesn't follow my recommendations because she has to. She follows them because they work. And if they didn't work? Then she should ignore them and find better advice, Marcus said simply. The goal isn't to establish my authority, it's to help her make the best decisions possible. Prince Valerian stepped forward with obvious conviction. Honored counselors, I formally propose that Dr. Webb be granted official advisory status within the royal administration. The assembly erupted in surprised harmonics as nobles discussed this unprecedented suggestion. Marcus felt his stomach perform several impossible maneuvers as he realized Prince Valerian was essentially offering him a permanent position in alien government. Prince Valerian, Counselor Zorith said with obvious concern, you're proposing to formalize alien influence over Zephyrian policy. I'm proposing to formalize effective consultation protocols that have demonstrably improved imperial governance, Prince Valerian replied. Dr. Webb's methods work. Strategic advantage demands that we utilize what works. Queen Lysandra moved to stand beside Marcus, her presence lending royal weight to Prince Valerian's proposal. The question before this assembly isn't whether Dr. Webb should advise Zephyrian policy. The question is whether we're wise enough to learn from methods that produce superior results. Elder Counselor Thex consulted with his fellow nobles in rapid harmonic discussion before addressing the assembly. Dr. Webb, if granted official advisory status, what would you require from this position? Marcus looked around the assembly hall at hundreds of alien faces waiting for his answer, and realized that his response would reshape not just his own future, but potentially the relationship between species across the galaxy. Honored counselors, he said, I would require the same thing I require from any medical consultation: honest communication, access to accurate information, and the understanding that my recommendations are suggestions, not commands. And your goals? To help people solve problems more effectively. Whether those people are patients in a medical bay or citizens of an interstellar empire, the principle is the same: identify what's wrong, develop solutions that work, and implement them with care for everyone affected. The assembly voted through harmonic consensus, a musical process that took nearly an hour as hundreds of voices blended into complex patterns of agreement. When the final harmonies resolved, Elder Counselor Thex announced the result. Dr. Marcus Webb, by unanimous consent of this assembly, you are hereby appointed Royal Advisor for Humanitarian Policy, with authority to provide consultation on any matter affecting the welfare of Zephyrian citizens. As the assembly dispersed amid continued harmonic discussion, Queen Lysandra approached Marcus with a smile that could illuminate star systems. Congratulations, Dr. Webb, she said formally, though her tone carried warmth that spoke of genuine friendship. You are now officially authorized to continue doing what you've been doing all along. And what exactly have I been doing? Marcus asked, still processing the fact that he'd apparently been promoted to Alien Royal Advisor through competent medical practice. Helping people stand when they fall, Queen Lysandra replied, her hand briefly touching his shoulder in the same gesture of support he'd offered her during the coup attempt. And teaching the rest of us to do the same. Prince Valerian joined them with obvious satisfaction. Dr. Webb, I look forward to learning your consultation methods. If collaborative leadership produces these kinds of results, it becomes a tactical necessity. Your Highness, Marcus said, I'm not sure there's much to learn. I just try to identify problems accurately and suggest solutions that actually help. That, Prince Valerian replied with a smile that suggested very sharp teeth, is apparently more revolutionary than either of us realized. 6 months later, the Zephyrian Empire had become the most cooperative, diplomatically successful, and internally stable civilization in the galaxy. Marcus's humanitarian consultation protocols had been adopted by dozens of other species, creating a new model of governance based on service rather than domination. Queen Lysandra still requested his input on major policy decisions, but now those consultations were broadcast across the Empire as educational programs on collaborative leadership. Prince Valerian had established the first interstellar academy for ethical governance, with Marcus serving as the primary instructor for courses on diagnostic policy analysis. And in the medical bay where it all began, a small plaque commemorated the moment when helping someone stand had accidentally triggered a revolution in galactic politics. True authority comes not from the power to command, but from the wisdom to serve. The galaxy, it turned out, had been waiting for someone to prove that the strongest leaders were those who lifted others up, and that the most powerful orders were suggestions offered with genuine care for those who received them. Marcus never did finish his original medical consultation protocols. As it turned out, teaching an entire empire how to help people stand was significantly more important than any routine diplomatic health assessment could ever be. He said, trying to project diplomatic confidence he didn't entirely feel, I have provided medical consultation and ethical analysis when requested by Queen Lysandra. All advice has been offered in good faith and with respect for Zephyrian sovereignty. Medical consultation, repeated Counselor Vexthera, her skin shifting to skeptical purple tones, that has resulted in fundamental changes to imperial territorial policy, military deployment strategies, and judicial procedures. Public health considerations are relevant to all those areas, Marcus replied, falling back on the same explanation he'd given Prince Valerian. But you are not Zephyrian, pointed out Counselor Zorith with obvious disdain. You cannot understand the cultural and historical context that informs our governance traditions. Prince Valerian, who had been observing from the royal section with calculating interest, stood to address the assembly. Honored counselors, I have spent the past week observing Dr. Webb's consultation methods. I request permission to present evidence regarding his advisory effectiveness. Granted, Elder Counselor Thex announced, though his tone suggested he expected Prince Valerian to support traditional noble concerns. What followed was the most extraordinary presentation Marcus had ever witnessed. Prince Valerian didn't just defend Marcus's advisory role, he systematically demonstrated how collaborative consultation had improved every aspect of imperial governance where it had been implemented. Dr. Webb's approach to policy analysis, Prince Valerian explained, activating holographic displays that filled the assembly hall with comparative data, has increased imperial efficiency by 37%, reduced civilian unrest by 62%, and improved military operational effectiveness by 24%. The assembly murmured with obvious surprise as the evidence accumulated. Marcus realized that Prince Valerian had been conducting his own systematic evaluation of collaborative governance principles. Furthermore, Prince Valerian continued, Dr. Webb's ethical framework has prevented 3 potential diplomatic crises, identified solutions to resource allocation problems that had persisted for decades, and established protocols that have earned unprecedented respect from allied species. Counselor Vexthera consulted her own data with growing amazement. Prince Valerian, these results suggest that alien advisory input produces superior outcomes to traditional authoritarian decision-making. Precisely, Prince Valerian confirmed. Dr. Webb has demonstrated that collaborative leadership creates strategic advantages that individual authority cannot achieve. Elder Counselor Thex leaned forward with obvious fascination. Dr. Webb, how do you explain these extraordinary results? Marcus looked around the assembly hall at hundreds of alien faces watching him with intense curiosity, and realized that his answer would either justify a revolution in Zephyrian governance or end his involvement in interstellar politics. Honored counselors,